Hello, I'm Michael Cantrell, and you are listening to the Prison Officer Podcast, a place to have a conversation about the forgotten cops that work in this country's jails, prisons, and correctional centers. A place for me to try to make sense of a career spent working inside the fence with some of the greatest people that nobody sees or recognizes for the important job they do to keep this world safe. If you love this podcast, hit the follow button, or better yet, share with your family, friends, or coworkers. In more than 28 years of corrections, I have used or supervised Pepperball hundreds of times. Now, as a master instructor for Pepperball, I teach others about the versatility and effectiveness of the Pepperball system. From cell extractions to disturbances on the rec yard, Pepperball is the first option in my correctional toolbox. With ranges up to 150 feet and hoppers that can hold 160 rounds, Pepperball is perfect for controlling large crowds or group disturbances on your yard. Pepperball allows for non-lethal direct impact to control inmates who refuse to comply with lawful orders, and area saturation allows you to achieve buffer zones between groups, or use it for area denial to keep inmates away from security equipment and other accessible areas. To learn more about Pepperball, go to www.pepperball.com or click the link below in this show's information guide. Pepperball is the safer option first. Well, hello and welcome back to the Prison Officer Podcast. Today's guest is David Schilling. He's worked in the criminal justice field since 2006 as a correctional officer, security threat group specialist, and gang instructor. His specialties are the use of runes and Norse pagan symbology, criminal intelligence processes, and alternative religions and beliefs, such as radicalized Asatru and Odinism. He's the author of Norse Germanic Runes and Symbols, the field reference guide for law enforcement and corrections, which we highlighted the last time he was on the podcast. And he has a new book out called The Jail Intelligence Manual, How Jails Can Implement Low-Cost and No-Cost Intelligence Practices that Proactively Assist Investigations, Solve Crimes, and Enhance Security. Considered an expert in runes and Norse pagan symbology, David has shared information with gang investigator associations, local, state, federal agencies, and even internationally. So, welcome, David, back to the Prisoner Officer Podcast.
Thank you. It's good to be back.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you back on. We had a good conversation last time, so
yeah, definitely.
I'm really interested in hearing about this new book.
Oh, good. Good. I'm excited to share about it. So,
well, tell me, let's jump into it. How did you come up with the idea for this book? What did you see a need out there, and that's what made you want to step into this?
With the Jail Intelligence Manual, there's a definite need out there. Most small and medium-sized jails don't have a lot of the budget like larger facilities do. You're certainly not going to see a full-time intelligence person in their jail staff, not by any means. That's usually, if there's any intelligence work done, it's usually one of the investigators on the law enforcement side, the police side, and they go off of what the officers might gather. There's somewhat of a lack of training, too, as far as intelligence gathering within jails goes. They might get a little piece of it during academy. I know it depends on the agency, too, but they might get a little piece of that, but more often than not, and as you well know, correctional officers' day is filled up with a lot of stuff. Much less trying to think of, okay, I got to gather some info on this guy over here. So the idea behind this book was to help change people's mindset a little bit to where they have a little more of an intelligence gathering mindset. And as they go through their day doing their regular activities, they're going to be naturally aware of, oh, hey, wait a minute, there's something there. I should jot that down, take it down. And that's essentially how it works inside the facility. Now, you're not going to go on a targeted mission necessarily. Your targeted mission is just your regular day. And that's what we talk about in the book is how to go about that.
Excellent. Yeah, there may be a specified intelligence officer or an investigator, but especially in those small agencies and really in all agencies, your housing unit officer, your intake officer, they're the bread and butter of what the investigator works with. And they gather that, correct?
I agree. I agree with that completely. Yeah. They're the ones who see people 24/7. The intelligence officer, they're going to compile everything that they receive, but it's all going to come from that unit officer.
So, and I've seen this over the years. a lot of times the unit officer, the intake officer, the ones that's working the, in the dirt with the inmates, they feel a little bit nervous or embarrassed to share intelligence with investigations. They don't want to be made fun of. They don't want to, have somebody look at them and go, well, that's not really important. Can you talk to that a little bit? How do we get past that? How do we get them involved?
Getting people like that involved can be a little bit hard, getting over the embarrassment factor. I guess for myself anyway, I never really had that a whole lot.
Right.
The best way to get over the embarrassment factor is to go through some training, I believe, and be like, okay, these are the issues we're really looking for. I understand some people go out there, oh, so-and-so was talking about beating up a guy when he gets out. That doesn't really mean a lot. But if so-and-so is on the phone talking about, okay, I have 10 girls at this hotel and I need you to take care of business for me while I'm in, well, that's a whole different ballgame. Now we're into human trafficking and prostitution. So
Right.
teaching people to triage what's important and what's not, I think, is the best way around that. Otherwise, my whole thing with it is, if you're unsure of it, just send it up anyway.
Right. If you see something, say something.
Yeah, you can always include in your email, hey, I'm not sure if this is worth anything, but here you go.
Right. And I used to do a lot of that. I don't know if you guys want this, but here's what I saw. And that I never had my heart broke because they didn't listen to something or take it. But I know some people, they get nervous about that. So tell me, how'd you get involved in investigations? What led you down that path?
It started off in 2007, and probably before that, actually, when I'd been in the U.S. military way earlier. I remember seeing gangs in the military when I joined up in 1989, which is which is longer ago now than most of the officers I work with for their age. So,
yes.
I remember seeing gangs there, and I was like, what's this all about? What's going on? Time goes by. I start working in the jail at the age of 35, and they had a spot come open for a gang information deputy to work on the shift. And I'm like, okay. And that's just somebody who's designated to kind of specialize in that. And as they work through the day, ideally you would gather info. They hadn't really done a lot with that type of stuff, a whole lot. Staff were relatively untrained at that point in time. Nobody really knew about, what should we be looking for or listening to. They'd go to a little bit of training here and there, maybe a conference once in a blue moon, and that was it. So they sent me to a conference, and, before that I'd worked with investigators. They were wondering about some runes, and runes are a part of my heritage. So I'd always been a bit interested in those, and I managed to translate that out for these two investigators at that time. And things just kind of bloomed from there. Right. And before I know it, I'm going to different trainings on intelligence and gangs and everything else, and just kind of all gelled up to where I am today. If I had to list everything now, it would take a long time.
Right. Quite a path. Let me go to your book here.
Sure.
I really like this paragraph here, and I think it sums up, some of the problems, and that, well, that's the name of the chapter, the problems we face. But so to the book. Correctional staff sometimes believe that information about the institution should be kept solely within the institution. Some police officers feel that correctional officers have nothing to contribute to their investigations, assuming that correctional staff has nothing to offer them. Some correctional officers and administration believe that jail information should be kept only inside the facility. All of these beliefs are outdated, having no place within law enforcement, corrections, or the 21st century. The criminal justice system is a tripod. Nobody stands up if a leg is removed. We must all stand together. Corrections and policing can and must coexist without friction. How tough has that been for you over the years to be accepted coming from corrections? I know you go to gang association meetings and stuff, and that includes a lot of law enforcement and corrections. How tough has it been for you to get accepted in that?
It
from law enforcement community?
um it took a while. At the conferences, it wasn't so bad because you have so many people from diverse states there, and it
Right?
seems to be almost state specific as far as how corrections and cops get along.
Yes.
Uh, Here in Minnesota, here we have the post board, everything else, and either you're a licensed officer or you're not. So I think there's that bit of divide right there. Some of it's just old school practices. Some of the old school cops would be like, they're just jailers. They don't know anything about anything. They don't need any education like we got. And they create a little bit of a rift like that. Then you have corrections people on the other side going, well, if the cops want something, they can go and find it themselves. And that doesn't help anything either. You
Right.
know, it's
Right.
a lot of it's a lot of type A personalities, a lot of ego in there. And I think if we can all set that aside just for a little bit, we could actually work together a little bit. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Big thing,
Yeah.
I've told this to cops right to their face, and I'll say, yeah, I don't want your job. And I know you don't want my job. I'm just trying to help you out a little bit, okay? And they're like,
Right.
oh, okay. It's try to take away some of that and, just be friendly, be polite. Even if somebody's
Right.
not being polite, still be polite because why burn a bridge if you don't have to? It's,
Oh, absolutely.
I don't know what their previous experience was with jail staff either. So, I try not to make too many assumptions that way. But it's gotten a lot
I've got
better.
a buddy. I've got a buddy. He's a police officer, and he tells me all the time. He says, "I don't know how you walk inside that prison. That's crazy." I said, "I don't know how you walk up on a car and not know whether it's a good guy or a bad guy. That's crazy." Everybody I work with's a bad guy, so it seems normal to me. But to him, he's like, "I don't want to work there."
That's the
Um,
same way I think too. It's we already know the people that we have. They don't.
right,
Are
right.
they pulling over a
So,
nice guy or a murderer?
absolutely. Um, so a lot of people, a lot of police officers, they start their process on the outside with investigations. They're going to write a report. They're going to ask questions. They're going to gather all these details. That's going to go to the police department. But a lot of them, I do think, have a misconception that once they drop them off at booking, at intake, that investigations, the ability to investigate quits. And that's for a lot of things, that's just when it starts. We're able to, get stuff out of the inmates that they couldn't. Talk to me about that and how inmates change once they come inside our system.
If an inmate's somebody who's a frequent flyer that's been a customer before, so to speak, um,
Mm,
they get to be very comfortable around correctional staff. I guess we become a fixture to them. They don't see us as being the cops necessarily. And
right,
if you work everything correctly, they're not going to worry about you too much because you're going to appear to be far too busy making sure the unit's running correctly. Everybody's getting through their medical appointments, education, everything else.
right,
And there's a lot of truth to that too, because that does eat up a lot of the day. But yeah, you're right. That is when the investigation really does start to begin. And I've been very lucky to work with some very good people on the law enforcement side as far as that goes. And I think it's almost easier for them once they remove the human from the outside and put them on the inside, then they can look at all the other evidence that's out there. And in the meantime, we
right,
have the person in a controlled environment where we can gather almost anything we want short of digital evidence, which requires a warrant.
right, right. It's almost, and I've heard, we monitor phone calls, we sit in the visiting room, and you're right that we do become this fixture. They don't even look at us sometimes. When they get on the phone, they get a recording says this is being monitored.
And
Yet they will get on the phone and talk about stuff that it'll blow your mind.
yeah,
Crimes, everything else.
I think they just blow right through that because they're so eager to get to their call. It's like, yeah, whatever. And off we go. They can't say they weren't warned.
No, they can't. How much do you guys pick up? I know you work at a local level, and I came from a federal prison system last, and of course we had people who were paid to monitor phone calls every
Mm-hmm.
day. I know you guys probably can't do that; you have to pick and choose. But how does that work with you guys?
That's exactly how it works. There'll be people that they will pick and choose, and it's pretty easy. If you have somebody that's in jail for a DUI, first time, never been in jail before, doesn't have a criminal history of being up to stuff, not a gang member, probably not going to look at him as closely as you do the guy who got picked up for first degree controlled substance sales. That guy, you're
Right.
probably going to, we might not listen to their calls through the computer or anything, but when we walk by them and they're on the phone, we're going to keep an ear out. And okay, what are they talking
Mm.
about? If it sounds like they're trying to do some sort of business, for us, it's as simple as logging the date, time, and the phone location. And that's something that we can send up to the
Right.
investigator because they can all log into the same phone system we do. So you just have to
Yeah.
target things a lot more. All the visits are recorded.
Right. I talked to in an episode previous to this. I talked to a gentleman who specializes in technology and stuff that's going on. We talked a little bit about AI, and I think AI is really going to step in, especially at the local levels, and be able to pick out words, be able to pick out phrases more so. I know it does that a little bit, but when that comes to the local level, that's really going to focus what you guys are able to take a look at and what comes out of that.
Oh, most definitely. I mean, there's another fellow I sent my book to, a guy named Rory McBride. I'm not sure if that's who. I can't recall the episode. I'm not. He might have talked to somebody different, but he has a company called Wiretap Tech, and that's exactly what they do. Is with their software, they can sniff out phone calls, sniff out keywords, all that. And I think a lot of the phone companies are actually going to all that now too.
Yeah. I'm sure the NSA has that
Yeah, and
for all of our phone calls.
I guarantee through the research and the purchases I've made, I'm on probably a few different lists. So
Absolutely. Let me go back to the book one more time. We talked a little bit about how correctional officers work in this process, and correctional officers know your role and be proud of what you do. And that was the section here. Correctional officers involved in information and intelligence gathering can and should establish relationship with federal agencies, their home state's Department of Corrections, the county, and the city police. What may seem like a trivial piece of information may be the missing piece of the puzzle to a crime, and so far has remained unsolved. A collaboration between corrections and law enforcement agencies can lead to drug interdictions, locating fugitives, and the location of murder victims and weapons. Can you give me an example of what you've seen with that over the years?
we've had cases made where people out selling drugs on the street have been brought to jail off of information that we've given investigators by walking by,
Mm-hmm.
hearing what people are talking about on the phone. People get picked up on warrants because we overhear a phone call or we overhear inmates talking, oh yeah, so and so is staying here.
Right.
It's any number of possibilities. Or you might hear,
Yeah.
the drug dealer or the pimp in jail saying, oh yeah, take care of business, my girls are at this motel. Oh, okay, well that's
Mm-hmm.
different. Now we can send that to the street crimes team on the PD side.
Right.
There's
Right.
many different examples of that have taken place over the years.
And officers being the front line of a lot of our investigations because they've got their hands, and like you talked, they walk by the phones, maybe they're listening. Talk a little bit about, when they do cell searches or when they're patting down inmates, what's some of the stuff they should be on the lookout for? I know I've seen officers who'll pull out a piece of paper out of an inmate's pocket, and the inmate will go, oh, that's just a note. And they'll flip through it, and then they'll just put it back. And I know you've got some techniques where when you're doing a cell search, maybe you gather that information that may be written or notes or gang affiliated, that type of stuff. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. Well, at least in our jail, we have a camera up in booking that's used for tattoos. And ideally, what we'll do with that is if we do a shakedown, uh, if I'm on the shakedown, I might stick that in my cargo pocket, just not say anything. The inmates are taken out of their cells. We do the search. And as we're doing a search, if I run across any drawings, any documents, any kites like that, like you're talking about, little folded up pieces of paper with
Right.
phone numbers, names, might be a roster, a list. Take a picture of it. We put that right back where it was. And quite honestly, we just don't say anything about it at that point. We just pass the information up. The other way is if I do take a look at stuff like that, I've talked to other correctional officers about this in the past. If you run across something during a pat down, like a list or something, make a mental note of it, but don't say, "Hey, what's this? Are you a drug dealer? What's going on?" Because you're going to shut down your information source at that point. Just make it a point to do a cell search on that guy later on in the shift.
Right.
Like many jails are required to do every shift, we're required to do 2 cell searches per shift. So it's as simple as just making that one of them. Because the thing we have time on our side. We don't have to get it immediately. We can wait a day or two and then go back and take a look.
Yeah. Keep it from looking targeted. Make it look like it's just part of the normal everyday process. Right. Yeah.
And in the worst...
No,
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, in the worst case scenario, if there is a kite like that in somebody's cell and I don't have a camera or anything with me, I might just even snatch the piece of paper because the guy might just think he lost it too. So, because it is valuable. And at that point, we can take a look at it, maybe jot it down or take a picture of it, then put it back, that type of thing.
Yeah. You mentioned having the camera during booking for tattoos. The officer that's working intake, what would you like to see them looking for and questions that they're asking or maybe flags that they should pay attention to when they're working booking?
When everybody comes in, we have a gang questionnaire that people go through during the booking process. Gang questionnaires have gotten to be, I don't want to say the word unreliable, but a lot of people just won't admit nowadays when they're a member of a gang like they used to. People don't wear the same colors anymore. Sometimes they don't even get the same tattoos. One thing that officers up in booking can do is, at least in our facility, there's a phone up there where people can make phone calls for free. And before they head down to the unit from the booking area, they get a chance to make some phone calls. And ideally, the booking officer, if they're not too busy, will be able to keep an ear out and say, "Oh, hey, this guy was talking about this and this on the phone." And that's usually the time when people are the most desperate, too, if they have evidence on the outside that they need to get covered up. So,
right. Hey, Mom, there's bail money in the mattress.
Yeah. The other thing is, as much as you can, take good, clear photos of those tattoos. Even if they're not a gang-related tattoo, it's still an identifying mark, is almost as good as a fingerprint. So,
oh, absolutely.
I mean, there's been cases we've helped law enforcement identify bodies that have been found just by the tattoos that were on them. So,
yeah, yeah, that was one of the absolutely one of the identifiers when I was with Bloodhounds and we were doing fugitive type stuff. That was definitely one of the things that we were looking for, so we knew we had the right person. Same two people rarely have the same tattoo in the same place.
Well, this was years ago, but there was a guy who broke into a liquor store, and he broke in by breaking through the ceiling. And when he jumped down, he took measures. He covered up his head with his T-shirt, wrapped his head up, but they identified him off the big tattoo he had over on his arm over on the left side. That was pretty funny.
So if you've got an officer out there, and I know there's a lot of them, I know a lot of people enjoy the investigations part of it. If you've got an officer who wants to get into investigations and, maybe they've got a few years in, but that's the direction they want to head, what's some of the advice you give them? What should they be doing and looking for?
Well, the first bit of advice, I sit down and talk to the person. And I always tell people this is one of my prime directives, at least. Law enforcement investigators, they're the ones who do the interrogations. We don't interrogate people. We elicit information, which is a big difference. Somebody starts talking about something, you look at them and go, "Oh, never heard of that. What's that about?" Make it a very casual thing. Don't, "Oh, so you're saying you're a member of a gang. What are the details? Tell me the details." We don't go in there demanding. We just, "Oh, that's interesting. Never heard of that." And a lot of the time, the ego of the person that you're asking that to will start to kick in. They're like, oh, yeah, I'm this and this. And, just a short time back, I had a guy, oh, yeah, I've been involved in this big gang and blah, blah, blah in Colorado. And, we're practically organized crime. And I'm like, oh, wow, that's impressive. And then,
Right.
couldn't keep him quiet for the next 20 minutes.
Absolutely. Ego always does seem to get them.
Oh, yeah, especially if you're full of
Doing a little bit,
surprise.
absolutely. Doing a little bit of research ahead of time, I always found helped me. And if I knew or I suspected somebody was part of a gang, I'd like to know who the other people were that had been through there or possibly were still there. And then when you start that conversation, you can, instead of asking what gang are you with, do you know Ray Ray? Do you know so-and-so? And let them fill in the gaps. It's a lot about letting them fill in the gaps. It's kind of like doing an interview on a podcast. I'm not going to sit here and tell you what to say. I'm going to ask questions and try to get you to tell me your story, and it's kind of the same thing.
Exactly. Yeah, it's not an interrogation, it's a conversation. In the end is what it boils down to.
Yeah.
And yeah, if you get the person talking, keep your mouth shut and just let them talk. That's what I do with people, at least. So, and have a pretty good deal of success doing things like that.
Yeah. I'm going to go back to the book here. I saw something in here that I had never heard of before, and we could talk about it, but I think it goes to being a good investigator. So it says a Giglio or a Brady list is a list compiled usually by a prosecutor's office or a police department containing the names and details of law enforcement officers who have sustained incidents of untruthfulness, criminal convictions, candor issues, or some type of issue placing their credibility into question. If you embellish or stretch the truth, I suggest you not go into this line of work. You're a liability for officers who have integrity, and integrity cannot be compromised. Nothing less than complete integrity will suffice. Now, that says a lot about who we want in our profession. And talk a little bit about the Giglio and the Brady list. I've never heard of that before.
If somebody gets put on a Brady list, it means somewhere along their career they've lied about something, either on a report or it might have been a disciplinary matter where their boss come up and they said, hey, we noticed you did this wrong. What happened? And the guy says, oh, no, that wasn't me. That was blah, blah, blah. Well, if you're not going to own what you do or don't know and you get caught lying about it, well, that's something a prosecutor later on, or should I rather, a defense attorney can look at that and go, well, the guy lied during a disciplinary proceeding, so why would we think he's not lying here? It shoots your credibility.
So tell me if I'm wrong. Yeah, tell me if I'm wrong to make this connection, but I almost feel like with the inmate population that there's a Giglio or a Brady list out there. And as an investigator, you really have to protect yourself and keep that credibility, keep that trustworthiness, because I've always seen two types of investigators. They're the ones that try to, lie their way through stuff, and the inmates see that. And then you've got the guy that's just so unassuming, and he's quiet and he's known to be honest. And that's the other type of investigator I see who's always more successful than the one paying off stuff with stamps.
Yeah, exactly.
Does that make sense? Yeah, talk to me about that.
Well, when you're dealing with guys, I don't know. I think it's important within corrections to be yourself as much as humanly possible. Don't put on I get it, you got to put on your game face, so to speak. But always try to be yourself as much as possible. Don't make up some grandiose thing from your imaginary past and say, oh, yeah, I remember I was off in this one area, pretty rough area, blah, blah, blah. And, eventually somebody's going to call you out and go, no, you're full of crap. We're not going to listen to that. And, they'll just laugh at you and go, yeah, whatever, that guy's a joke. We're not talking to him. It's just be who you are. That's all there is to it. I'm a guy from small town, middle of Minnesota, out in the country. Well, people are fine with who you are. It doesn't matter to them. But if you're a liar and lying about it, well, what else are you going to lie about? Inmates see that.
I'm kind of like you. Inmates knew immediately that I was a a white guy from a small town in the middle of the country. You know, I couldn't pretend to them like I knew what downtown gang USA was like if I wanted to. But the fact that I always had this curiosity about that, and I would play it off as being dumb, which at the beginning I was very dumb, but I learned over the years. But that playing dumb always worked well for me. You know, no, I don't know about, tell me about that. And then they'd tell me about where they lived and where they grew up and how that goes on and how gangs work and stuff like that. So I always found it to my advantage to be very honest about who I was and where I came from.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because at that point, people will open right up. Oh, God, yeah, it was rough where I came from. And, you know, saw lots of things and this and that. And, you know, it's, once again, playing the ego just a little bit there. But also being very honest and them going, oh, hey, this guy doesn't know about this stuff. I should tell him. You know, people always, even the so-called bad guys, whatever you want to call them, they still want to share their story or educate people if they know something. And if they think somebody doesn't know something, they're still going to want to, oh, hey, well, you don't know about that? Hold on, I'm going to look smart here for a second and tell you all about this.
Right. Yeah. And doing the opposite in my position would have just taken away from my trustworthiness. I had a warden tell me one time, he said, when inmates quit coming to you and asking questions, you've got a problem because they no longer trust you. And that doesn't mean it has to be some big question about, you know, something in an investigation. But even if you're the housing unit officer and they don't come up and ask you the questions about policy or how procedures work in that housing unit, when that stops, you need to take a look because you're no longer being trusted. And trust is an important thing in our game.
Absolutely. I mean, really, the whole game runs that way. It runs off of trust. You know, at some point, we have to trust that 40 guys aren't going to band up and go after us. You know, we have to have a certain amount of trust just to walk into the unit.
So let me back up a little bit to something you said earlier about training the officers. So if I just gave you carte blanche, you can have the officers for 2 days a year. What would you teach them during those 2 days? What is investigations needing from those officers? What do they need them to know?
Well, we're going to get a crash course in intelligence for law enforcement.
Sure.
Probably more so that than anything else, just the basic techniques of intelligence gathering. And we're going to probably do a rehash of our interpersonal communications, how we talk to people, how you come across. Going to be a lot of talk about what we just talked about Brady Giglio, about honesty, about being yourself, and basically trying to teach people how to be more aware of what's going on, at least with this stuff, the intelligence, the information gathering.
Right.
Basically, the book kind of covers it all. It's kind of a catch-all for a quick introduction. 2 days, we could go over quite a bit of stuff. I'd want to show them the intelligence cycle, a few other things. Probably take them up through investigations quick and let them talk to an investigator. Hey, this is what we do with your info. I think that's important for people to know that what they're sending up has some effect on the other end. You know, and at the same time, with new officers, I would also probably talk to the investigator as well, saying, hey, if you get an email from this guy, just shoot him back a quick thank you, because that means a lot. You know, it's when you send emails off into space and you hear nothing back, that gets a little bit discouraging after a while for the person who's actually gathering all the info and sending it up. And, you know, then you watch the guy later on get an award for the big bust he made, and you go, oh, yeah, I remember sending that guy info.
Yeah. Yeah, we've seen that before. Yeah, that's a morale killer. Absolutely. And I've worked for both. I've worked for the office who does that and really kills the morale. And then I've worked for the office who wouldn't take an award for anybody in that office, and everything is pushed down to the officers. Of course, that builds morale. I think another thing, and tell me what you think, if you're that investigator out there and you're trying to build, because you've got to build confidence with the officers too. I know for me, one of the first times I got to walk into an investigations office, see the files, see the cameras, see everything that's going on. It was very impressive for me. It made an impression on me. So how important is it for those investigators to bring in an officer once in a while? Let them see what's going on. Let them see what the big picture is. I think that's
it's
important.
extremely important because that allows the correctional officer to see what the bigger mission is. We're not just gathering information just to make ourselves look good. Ideally, we're going to have some sort of a positive effect on not just the facility, but what happens out in society.
Right.
We're helping, keep drugs out of the community, keep human trafficking out, to maybe even to save some people from overdosing off the fentanyl shipment that got intercepted, let's say. I mean,
Sure.
there's a lot of far-reaching effects that I think the investigators could really tell officers about.
So, you put out the first book, Norse Germanic Runes and Symbols,
Mm-hmm.
and now you've got the Jail Intelligence Manual. What are you working on now?
Right now, it was going to be a book originally called Understanding True and Odinism, A Guide for Law Enforcement and Corrections. The last couple days, I've had some conversations with a friend of mine who retired from Kansas DOC, and
right.
We were talking a little bit via email about the importance of including a few more different belief systems in from Northern Europe. So the book's now going to be called Understanding Germanic Paganism. And that's an introduction to the beliefs, symbols, and practices of Asatru and Odinism. And then we branch off into Wotanism, which is more the white power version of Odinism. That's where you have a lot more David Lane stuff coming in. Odalism, Vanatru, Foreign Sid, some of the more lesser known religions that are out there, but they're all very closely related. The book isn't just for people to gather intelligence necessarily, but it's also going to be to help officers to gain a better understanding of what the inmates that they deal with are doing, or the people that they see in the street.
Right. Yeah, I mean, this is another example. Muslims are a legitimate religion, but for years inside our prisons, we've had a section of those Muslims who are more of a gang, who operate more of a gang. And I think a lot of the white gangs decided that, hey, we need a religion so that we can do some of this stuff, so that we can kind of hide what we're doing. And that's where a lot of this has come from, correct?
Yeah, it's whole idea behind this book is to help officers be able to tell the difference to separate the religious from the criminal, I guess you might say. Is this
right?
For instance, within Asatru, you do a cell search. A guy has a number of books about Norse mythology or Anglo-Saxon mythology or whatnot. But what is with that? Does he have a copy of Mein Kampf? Is there any literature from David Lane or Wodan's Volk in there? Books by Ron McVan, Creed of Iron, for instance. Once we start getting into any books that start talking about the Aryan race, March of the Titans by Arthur Kemp would be another one. When you start mixing that in, all of a sudden now you don't have just religion anymore. Now you have radicalized religion coming into play. And that's going to definitely be something to keep an eye on from that point on. Because now, are they practicing religion, or are they just using the religious meetings to meet up as a gang?
Right. Now, David Lane, I think I had him at Leavenworth.
That sounds right.
Is he doing federal time?
Oh, he did straight federal time after his little stint he had with the Silent Brotherhood. Yeah, he died back in 2007 now.
Yeah, I was trying to look and see. It seems like he was at Leavenworth while I was there. He is a central figure in a lot of the white Aryan neo-Nazi type gangs and stuff in the prison. Someone that they're looked up to. He's written a bunch of books. You know much about him? Can you talk
I know
towards
some
that?
about David Lane. I know that he's written a huge amount of literature, well over 1,000 pages. And I have a lot of the writings that he did. Some of his books, like Deceived, Defiant, and Damned. A lot of the different stuff like that. he worked in conjunction with a guy named Ron McVan as well. And Ron McVan and David Lane kind of, from in prison, co-founded Wotan's Volk. That's where all of a sudden we have the
Right.
acronym Wotan, Will of the Aryan Nation. And it's not so much a religion as it is all about how to be a good Aryan anymore. I don't know how to simplify it down without just rambling on here.
Right. But
go ahead.
he's also the one that they killed a radio talk show host, and that's what he originally went to prison for. But yeah, he's the leader of a bunch, or kind of the founder of a bunch of this that we now deal with as Aryan religion.
Yeah, he's
right?
pretty much a saint. I've talked to guys who've been in the federal system, and they have nothing but great things to say about David Lane and how he helped their religion and how he helped Odinism to be recognized by the prison system, so on and so forth. Like I said, if there's any reading list that an Asatru or Odinism group would have, and David Lane is on there, I would really be raising an eyebrow at that point. Because all of a sudden we're well beyond religion and we're into white power now.
Right. And that's something that absolutely you look for with, especially Aryan, is they tend to have reading lists. We want you to, when they bring them into the gang, we want you to read these books. They want to indoctrinate them. So that's a normal thing to find during a cell search.
It's the same thing guys talking about, okay, I had to study all this because we have a knowledge test that we have to take as well. So you might find lists of questions, not just about the gods, but about David Lane, or, about Robert J. Matthews, who was the leader of the Silent Brotherhood, the Bruder Schweigen, all of that stuff. It's March of the Titans. What's this book about?
Wow.
Oh, it's a history of the white race. Well, it's written from a bit of a slanted point of view, though.
Right.
So,
right. Wow. Yeah, good stuff there. Well, I know you've been been invited to a bunch of conferences. Tell me some of those that you'll be at this year, where people might be able to go catch up with you.
This February, I went down to Kansas for the Kansas Gang Investigators Association. I spoke down there. Awesome group of people down there. I still have to send some walleye down there to one of the conference organizers. He's from the state here in Minnesota, so we do have the best walleye. But
yes, you do.
Yeah, great group of people. Spoke to them for a couple hours just about the runes and about Asatru and Odinism a little bit. When I go to conferences, I have a large display that I put up with Asatru and Odinism ritual kit and a number of different books laid out. There's different versions of the runes laid out, and people come up if they have questions about anything. We can show them things, walk people through what a ritual would be like, and also true float. Try to give people a little bit of perspective. I also try to provide a little bit of balance on there and go, okay, when you see that somebody practices also true, don't jump to conclusions right away. Not everything is evil and bad.
Right.
They just might be doing something different. But
right. There are legitimate followers of those religions out there, just like there are Muslims that aren't gang related, that aren't prison related. So yeah, we do have to keep that in mind.
And they outnumber the bad guys by far, but the bad guys are the most vocal and get all the press. So
we don't see that in the U.S. as much. How large are those religions? Maybe in Europe or Scandinavia, is that a large religion over there?
They're still fairly small, but they're very well known. They're also very non-racist, and they speak out against racism constantly. Over here in the U.S., we have a group called the Troth, and they have Declaration 127, and they just recently signed what was called the Declaration of Deeds. And what all that speaks to is disavowing any ties with anything having to do with their religion being tied with the idea of racial purity or any of that stuff. That was never in there to begin with.
Right. Right. If you go back to history, pagans are not racially pure. there's a lot of tribes there that are pagan.
Hate to burst their bubble. I'm afraid none of us really are, though. So
yeah, that's true. So what are you doing later this year? You got conferences coming up?
I have Midwest Gang Investigators coming up for the national conference in Indiana in May. I'll be doing the MGIA
Okay.
conference in Wisconsin for their state training in July. Florida, I think, might be coming up. I have to talk to those guys yet and see what's going on. That would be in August, and then finish out the year in October. That'll be out in Lake Tahoe with the CCWA, the Chicano Correctional Workers Association. And that's a one-day conference out there, and
Nice.
they promised a very nice time out there because
Yeah.
Lake Tahoe is beautiful, and I've never been there, so
I haven't either, so I hope you
that should
enjoy
be good.
that. So your first two books are out. I know. When's the third one come out?
I'm looking here sometime in 2023. Now that it's expanded out a little
Okay.
bit, might take a little while longer, but this book isn't going to be a big, thick book by any means. It's meant to be a quick reference guide for people and to provide resources to where if they
Right.
want to learn more about it, they can use that resource and go digging further. It's kind of the
Right.
quick and
Right.
dirty guide to this, just so you can have some understanding coming out of the gate so you're not caught surprised.
Sure. Yeah, and some of these, you're right. It doesn't have to be a big book, but what you're building here is definitely some books that should be sitting on gang investigators and correctional investigators' shelves. You're building this series of books that kind of build on each other, so I think that's great. Where can people find your books
I'm on
right now?
Amazon.com. And if you go to the search field, just type in jail intelligence. I'll be right there on the first page. All these books will be in something
Okay.
that is called the Jail Intelligence series. So they'll all be tied together. So if you search just for jail intelligence, they'll all come up together in one shot.
Excellent. And if they want to contact you, where can they contact you?
They can go to my website to www.runeresearch.com, all one word. Go ahead. There's a contact link on that page. Go ahead and feel free to contact me. I'm open to speak at people's conferences. If people want training, go ahead, contact me. We'll work something out. And if you just even have questions or need something translated that's written in runic lettering, let me know. I'm happy to help anybody.
Excellent. I know you've helped me by coming on the podcast. I've learned a lot, so it's always good to have you on here. And let's make a date for when you get that other book, and we'll do this again because I'm interested to hear about it.
I'll make sure you get a copy. I'll send you one.
Excellent. Thanks for coming on here, David.
Pleasure being on.
If you enjoy these podcasts, the best way to support the Prisoner Officer Podcast is to share these episodes with your friends or family on social media. Let me invite you to visit www.theprisonofficer.com. If you haven't already, check out the Prison Officer Podcast on Facebook and click that little follow button. Or leave us a message, or better yet, leave us a review. And if you're listening to us on Apple Podcast, Google, or Spotify, please click the subscribe button. Till next time, I'm Mike Cantrell. Watch your back, and please take care of each other out there behind those walls.